since I'm really eager to share ideas and to get your feedback about your ideas. I would like to express thanks for the poem. If we are not about hope, we have no reason to be here today. And also my gratitude for the incredibly reflective music. Felix Adler always thought that his gatherings should include music because it touches a much deeper chord in our psyches and emotions than just the mind does. Today, I'm reporting on a book group that we have founded out of the Ethics Society, uh, reading through the 1619 project. Um, I will say what Nicole Hannah Jones said was the origin of her work. She was a student, a grad student uh, at Notre Dame, and read a student paper and was just horrified to find indigenous, quote, savages mentioned in the paper. She finds it hard to believe that any member of the white race can can uh, believe that any member of the white race has the hypocrisy to call any other culture savage. The white race is the biggest murderers, uh, pillagers, and thieves of the modern world. The crimes they created were unnecessarily cruel and can only be described as acts of the devil. I hasten to add that not all white people have been indicted as devils. I would argue from a Marxist perspective that the ruling structure of each of the countries that engaged in this heinous practice of slavery did so for exploitation. And there was always resistance among many white people to the practice of slavery. So 1619 is known, I went to Virginia schools, as, quote, the red letter year. Anyone else here go through schools in Virginia? It's one reason I moved north. I wanted to spare my children growing up in the Confederacy. Uh, it was pointed out that three things happened in Virginia in 1619. The first blacks were brought to be enslaved. Um, the first House of Governance, the Burgesses, was formed with membership limited to white men who owned property, and the ship of women were brought over. Uh, so I would argue that 1619 is the root of racism, of oppression of male property owners, and uh, and the oppression of women. Um, that's a lot to live down, and I was treated to 3 years of Virginia history where that was celebrated. Uh, the first scholars writing on the topic, as widespread as democracy, race, dispossession, fear, and capitalism, uh, 18 scholars were included in Nicola's study, and 38 literary artistic people on poetry, fiction, and graphic arts. So far, our ethics book group has, on Zoom, has covered 8 chapters. We will continue through April and then resume in September until we finish the book. I would be happy to consult with folks from Long Island and help you structure your own book group should you want to do this. A number of facts and assertions that we have discussed in depth are these. We began with the section entitled Capitalism because the entire subjugation of the Western Hemisphere was powered by the need for European maritime countries to export and extort wealth. Uh, the wealth included precious metals, agricultural uh, uh, products, spices, furs, and were all stolen and bought and sold ultimately, the British were the most successful in the enterprise, uh, having the most advanced industrial structure. Flax, tobacco, sugar, cotton are all cultivated by enslaved people and shipped back to Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, and other industrial sites, and filled the coffers of the newly rich managerial class and funded further economic, political, and military and global expansion. I hasten to add that there are specific chapters on sugar and cotton in the Nicole Hannah book. And racist enslavement was the key factor propelling the expanse of the, uh, this enterprise. Those of you who have seen the musical 1776 are aware of the show-stopping song sung by the delegate from South Carolina, Molasses to Rum to Slaves. It is an extraordinarily gripping explanation of the role that enslavement played in the economic, social, political development of the colonies. Um, the chief criticism of the chapter, and broadly the entire work, is that it sidesteps a critical, I think, Marxist insight that the dual role of racism was to divide and conquer, to separate white working people from black, uh, and also the extraction of super profits. Now, how was this oppressive regime maintained? Subjugation of black enslaved people was based on fear. Thomas Jefferson opined that owning enslaved people was like, quote, having a wolf by the ear. The owners could not release their grip, but they knew that beneath the surface boiled a formidable black rage that could not be fully contained and that could erupt in any time. And indeed, from the 17th century on, white people in both North and South lived in fear that the men and women they whipped, raped, and forced to work without pay, if given the chance, would rise up and take revenge on their enslavers. And indeed, they fought back again and again. The first rebellion occurred in Virginia in what was known as Bacon's Rebellion. Nathaniel Bacon first mobilized uh, a racist troop to go after indigenous people. But when the government in Jamestown did not fund this adequately, he turned on Jamestown and he organized white indentured and working people and enslaved black people to rise up and burn Jamestown. This terrified the planter class and, in fact, prompted the beginning of the enactment of draconian slave codes that spread from Virginia throughout the South and to some extent through the North. Um, and again, they fought back. The first slave rebellion I discovered doing a lesson for Sunday school at Riverdale Yonkers Society was on none other than Christopher Columbus's uh, plantation on Santo Domingo. The indigenous people he had enslaved there rose up, were victorious, and escaped into the mountains, and by some accounts are still active as a discrete and insular people stemming from that rebellion. Every decade nearly saw the rise of the rebellion of enslavements. Uh, Gabriel Prosser, Nat Turner. Uh, I'm proud to say that two of my grandchildren are named Gabriel and Nat. Nate, in fact, is descended from Nathaniel Mason, Bacon on his mother's side. Uh, So it's important to realize that the roots of the movement to uh, free enslaved people stem back to the very decade of their first enslavement. And we're still fighting that fight now. As we know, the history of Reconstruction saw a brief period of alliance between white working people and black, but that was brutally put down in the 1876 sellout, where Rutherford B. Hayes withdrew federal troops that were protecting Reconstruction. This led to harsh institutions of Jim Crow, to Plessy Ferguson, discrimination, a regime of racist terror with lynchings, uh, and we're still facing that terror today. So, given that we are a faith of deeds as opposed to just creeds, although creeds inform our deeds, what what do we do now in response to this history? Well, first, we notice that there is an effort to suppress the critical race theory and 1619 project. Governor DeSantis has led this movement within Florida. Six other states have introduced legislation to ban the teaching of critical race theory. And Senator Cotton from Arkansas has introduced a bill in the Senate to defund any school district that teaches critical race theory 1619 from federal funds. These are being resisted, and groups of parents and teachers throughout the country are fighting back and teaching this wonderful, vital history, despite despite the need to do this. So, what else should we do in addition to defending this critical history? Um, I have been part of a group based in Harlem, um, an interfaith group called Congregations for Justice and Peace. And over 10 years now, we have engaged in vital projects. We worked with the Police Reform Organizing Project and had a great victory in guaranteeing that when people are in mental distress, that only mental health professionals be sent to help stabilize the situation and encourage them to seek treatment. The year I retired from law, 2016, tragically, Deborah Danner was murdered in her apartment in the Bronx by a police officer who came to apprehend her and drag her to Jacoby emergency room, which she desperately wished not to do. We, her pastor, now Bishop of New York, Matt Hyde from Church of Heavenly Rest, and Trinity Church Wall Street, and a bunch of the rest of us came repeatedly to court in the Bronx to fight for the conviction of this officer who killed her. It was a bench trial. The judge decided in 10 minutes that he was innocent. So now we're fighting to have him relieved from the police force. Um, we are fighting for adequate housing for all, including immigrants in New York City. The mayor is against this and refusing to go after funds readily available in Wall Street. He could to guarantee this housing. Um, we are fighting his uh, reintroduction of stop and frisk of young black men. Uh, and we are backing the process of monitoring court day and night to track the race of people who are brought into court, overwhelmingly black and brown. Uh, in the Bronx, we have established the climate justice movement, uh, have been backing up frontline communities who are the first and worst harmed by climate change. We've been fighting fracking, fighting for sustainable fuel. Uh, and in terms of peace, we're joining together with a number of rabbis and other folks fighting for a ceasefire in Gaza, a return to the hostages, and rebuilding Gaza, uh, and restoring some semblance of civil order. Uh, in the Essex Society, the social action group has backed the resumption of the earned child tax credit, which will resume bringing young people, children, out of poverty in this richest land. And we also are supportive of asylum seekers. This is a very joyful work, and it is my privilege to be an ethical leader and participate in it. And I'm eager now to hear your thoughts, particularly your testimony about projects that you have afoot or planned here on Long Island. Are there those who would like to join in this dialogue?
Thank you, Mr. White. We'll take 10 minutes of questions. If you have any questions for Mr. White, and also those people online, if you have questions, please raise your hand.
I don't have a question, but since there's a silence here, I do feel a connection. I've been talking for several years about nonviolent communication, and one thing that may strike a note is no enemy images is one of the concepts. So no matter who we're talking about, we can judge them and condemn them, or all kinds of things. We can set a distance, or we can try to understand what's going on and keep empathy. And that's one way to bring peace in the middle of conflicts. So that's something I do online mostly, but I started that in 2019. So it's a good way to get people together.
I appreciate that and would like very much to learn more about it.
A question for you, Jim. There's been lots of criticism of the 1619 project from the left. Could you address some of the criticisms and which you might agree with and which ones you do not?
Could you detail some of them? I'm aware of some from the right. Arthur?
Oh, I'm sorry. What was that?
Could you detail a few of the criticisms from the left?
Actually, no. I do know that there has been that kind of criticism. Maybe there's somebody here who can be more specific.
That would be helpful.
I think maybe David, just state what the criticisms have been, and let's see what Jim's response is.
I won't go into detail, but just take one central issue. Central to the critical race theory is the notion that all the American legal system is fundamentally through and through racist. That criticism systematically undermines the respect that the country has in law, and has laid the foundation for the radical right attack on our legal system. Right? So in some sense, the critical race theory is a forerunner of the systematic delegitimation of race in America. And it seems to me that is not only a profound criticism of systematic race theory, but suggests that we need to assume responsibility, those supporting it need to assume responsibility for the systematic delegitimation of the legal system with which we are now confronted by the radical right.
Thank you very much. Critical race theory was first formulated by Professor Derek Bell of Harvard. And we gave him the Elliott Black Prize, I think, at an assembly in Baltimore some years ago. I have practiced as a lawyer. I practiced actually for this appellate division of the Supreme Court. And 20 years ago, the Chief Justice of the court did an analysis of the court system and found that it was systematically racist. And subsequently, she has and others have tried to lead a movement to reform court practices. It has only been partially successful. Uh, but yeah, law was rooted originally in uh, protecting the enslavers. The most obvious cases were the Dred Scott case and Plessy v. Ferguson. There have been major steps forward from that, but there's a great deal to do, particularly in voting rights. And as I'm retired, a retired attorney, but it is my privilege to participate in working on that process. Another criticism is that initially Nicole Hannah Jones had proposed a thesis that uh, the main reason for resisting Britain on the part of the American colonists was to preserve slavery. She has since done further research and has backed off of that sweeping statement. She, I think, correctly points out that that was the reason for a number of the colonists, but not so for all of them.
Hi, my name is Steve Seiden. I wonder if you could address the issue of reparations.
How long do we have, Steve? Uh, I'm privileged to be friends with the former chair of the New York Episcopal Diocese Reparations Committee. And she's not active with them now, but there are discrete places where reparations have been enacted. It's particularly easy in places like Georgetown University, where they have targeted the descendants of the enslaved people that funded Georgetown and are now offering them full scholarships in reparation. Um, there are banks in Chicago and in Providence, Rhode Island, who are doing the same. But very little has happened with the bill in Congress that was proffered by a representative from Michigan 20 years ago, I think. And so that is an unpaid bill and a vital issue to attack.
Yeah, I mean, the concept to me seems to make all kinds of sense, but the among the problems is identifying who would benefit from it, who would receive it.
Absolutely. I think, there's a broad stratum of very poor, oppressed Black people in this country who should be funded for better education and preferential job treatment. Uh, but I don't see that happening in a comprehensive way anytime soon.
Can you think of a way that transferring funds in the form of reparations would be efficient and effective? I mean, I think lump sum payments might not accomplish what needs to be done.
I agree. I think lump sum would not. I think identifying programs that are well-founded and ongoing, that are helping struggling people who are brown and Black would be the better way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Yeah, we have one more question. Anybody on Zoom land having a question? Okay.
So, Jim, I mean, you're right about the need to have part of American history, the history of enslaved people and Black people and other groups. In what way does the 1619 Project do that in a way that other historians haven't done? What is unique about the 1619 Project?
I think what is unique is the comprehensive contribution of so many different scholars, not all historians, but I think I counted 18 different scholars who have added to this, and it has created an ongoing dialogue among historians and those of us who find history vital in terms of looking more deeply at the roots of systemic racism in society.